Welcome to the Traveling Professors. I'm Professor Bob.
And I'm Professor Sheri.
And together we are
the Traveling Professors.
Welcome to show number 116 of the Traveling Professors. This is about Chichen Itza, the Mayan city in the Yucatan. And it is part one, because I taught Latin American history for 27 years, basically Mesoamerican history up to the independence movement. And so I have a lot of background information to add. Plus, I'm considering on filming my class that I taught to have it for posterity. So we're going to go through the front part of Chichen Itza through to the Castillo. And then in part two, we'll do the rest of the site because it is quite extensive. Remember, we were operating out of Mérida for our vacation to the Yucatan. And you can see on this map where Chichen Itza is located. It's not too far from Valladolid. It's about halfway to Cancun. And that's about a 2.5-hour drive each way. Well, that's on a real good highway. This is the route of the Tren Maya rail line that's being constructed by the Mexican government. And they have a lot of it completed. You can go from Mérida to Cancun and other places, and you can go to Chichen Itza. However, the station is not completed yet. It would still take about 2 hours because they don't want to run it faster than the bus services and put the bus people out of business at this point. Think about when you go to the Yucatan or you go to Mexico about using Tren Maya. There's a lot of videos on YouTube showing you how effective it is and safe as well as reasonable. Now here's some of the major cities of the Yucatan at the Maya. We are visiting Chichen Itza over here. We intended to visit Mayapan, but there was a government squabble between the natives and they shut it down. We did go to Uxmal, so I will take you to Uxmal. Sheri and I will take you there. We also went to Caba over in this direction. So we have a lot left to see. If we look at this, to show this picture right here with the map, it gives you the impression that, gosh, they're just all stuck over in this one area. You have to understand the entire Yucatan in the Guatemala and Honduras has cities. These are the ones that have been excavated. There are lots of smaller towns and villages. Now on this map, what you see is the time of the Maya, where you have over here in the green. Mayan history is divided into three segments. There's what's called the pre-classic period, 1500 BCE to 200 AD. And then you have the classic period, which is 200 AD to 900 AD. Now that is the height of Mayan civilization. And after 900, there's a collapse. It's never fully been understood, but there are a lot of theories involved. They didn't disappear. The cities were abandoned and they moved into the jungle and lived in smaller areas, and some of the cities managed to survive. And then you reach the point where you get to what is called the post-classic, and that's 900 AD to 1541 AD, which, well, that's when the Mayans are the first to be encountered by the Spanish, but the last to be conquered. And even when they were, quote, conquered, they went into the deep jungle, and one city, Teasel, held out until the 1700s. But in the post-classic period, what happens is there's a civil war within the Toltec civilization, and a group is defeated and exiled. And they move to the Yucatan and create a new state. And it is completely different from the old Mayan state. It is much more warlike, which is pretty much the background to the Toltecs, and they're ultimately overthrown by the Aztecs. So what we're going to be looking at is Chichen Itza, which most of it is actually in the post-classic period. Most of it was built by the Toltecs over the old city. And I can show you, there are some places where you can still find it. However, a lot of the other cities, like Uxmal and Caba, they never really had a Mexican period. And so their architecture is pretty much the same. Here's the little map of Chichen Itza, but before we look at the map, here's a little video introduction. Welcome to the Traveling Professor. As usual, I'm Professor Bob, and Sheri's behind the camera. You can see where we are. We're at Chichen Itza with the magnificent Temple of Kukulkan behind us. And of course, it's also called the Castillo. So we hope you enjoy this trip through Chichen Itza. Well, here's what we are going to do. Now, since this is part 1, I'm only going to show you what we did in part 1, and then everything else will be part 2. So we came into the museum, into the cafeteria parking area, and they have a really good gift shop and great historical works and magazines. Unfortunately, our guide did not take us back there when we left. We went back by another direction. So as a result, Sheri and I got to go back to this place again. He also didn't take us to the 2 cenotes, but we'll worry about that later. So we will then come out into this open area where we have the Castillo, the calendar temple to the right, and then we have the ball court and the temple of the bearded man and the skull rack and the platform of Venus. So we will come out and then head to the ball court, go through it to the temple of the bearded man, and then to the skull rack and the platform of Venus, and then we will go around the Castillo. Then I will also talk about the ceremonial walkway and the sacred cenote at the very end and show you some clips and some other things with dealing with that. And then next time we will then pick up and cover everything else. But we went all the way actually off of this map. You see right down here at the bottom, excavation. Yeah, there's another set of excavations down there, and that's the part of the city that has the Puch architecture. In other words, those buildings were never destroyed and never replaced when the Toltecs came in. So it is a pretty good sized location, and as you can see on this map, they have accommodations if you want to spend the night here. I thought that would be kind of fun, but I'm not sure whether you can just wander around the ruins, which is what I would do and probably get in trouble. Well, here we are in Chichen Itza getting our tickets. I'm just showing you the line because we already had our tickets. We used an elite guide service for our tour of Chichen Itza, and they were excellent. The guide was superb, but he had a lot of, they debunked a lot of what had been used for a long period of time, even the sources. Now, we talked about that a little bit. For the most part, a lot of the original stuff that survives, like Delanda's exploration, trying to make up for what he did. Bishop Delanda was the first bishop of the Yucatan, and he believed that all the Mayan material was pagan and needed to be burned. And the story goes that after he burned most of the literature, he had a dream in which Christ appeared to him and said, you've done wrong. And he spent the rest of his life traveling around, writing down what he saw, talking to people, and trying to understand the writing. And some of his writing has indeed helped us. But that's just something you have to be aware of. It happens frequently. You'll go to a site and they want to give you the counter version of what is out there. And somewhere between the two is the truth. And I usually would just talk a little bit with him, and he was really surprised at as much as I knew, particularly with the gods and what have you. The tickets are quite expensive. You're going to be paying $35 or $40, but it's worth it. They protect the site. It's well done. But our tickets were already there. So we simply walk through and we start heading towards the site. And you can see the growth that comes up. There's vendors everywhere. Now, if you're a Mayan descendant, you can set up shop anywhere. And they were everywhere. And I thought we were going to come back and get material. And one of the things that the vendor sold was a wooden whistle-like thing that sounded like a jaguar. And I wanted one for myself and one for each of the grandkids, and we didn't go back by them. So I didn't get them. And I thought, well, I'll get them at Uxmal. No, they weren't selling them at Uxmal. So if you go to one of these places and you see something you want, get it. You never know whether they're going to take you back. So here we are going through a little bit further. You see some of the construction. Now, at the classic period, the cities were all basically run by the elites. There's even a wall around that kind of separate the regular people from the elites. And there's a road that goes between them. There are causeways that they've discovered between allied cities. So there is one, when we go to Uxmal, there's one from Uxmal that goes to its sister city, Caba. And so here we are, we're getting ready. You can see the Castillo, the main temple. It's the main sacrificial temple in Chichen Itza. And then looking through the forest growth to the other direction, you see the Mayan ball court complex, which is definitely one of the largest, if not the largest, in Central. And then, of course, we have the obligatory picture of Sheri and I out in the group. That's a nice thing about having guides. You can get a picture without having to worry about somebody stealing your camera. But here's a little panoramic view. I'm going to pan from the ball court area over to the Castillo.
Educated. I got what to do.
Go in that place. The problem is that as they try all
And this is what happened in Ekbalam.
I want to talk about the flat ground between the temple and the ball court. Now, it looks like this is dirt. Very frequently, people will go, well, how in the world did they put those temples without causing them to sink? Well, the interesting thing is if you go around to the other side of the temple of the Castillo, you see this excavation that's away from it. Now, that was an addition when they built the last version of it to reinforce the sides. But if you step away, you can look down at the trench and you see where the reinforcement juts out, and then you see the rest of the ground. The grass and the dirt is just barely over the top. There is a solid rock core across this whole thing. All of these temple areas have a solid core of stone underneath them, so that's why it's a little easier to build on them. Our first stop across the plaza is coming to the Temple of the Jaguar, and down below it you can see the smaller temple. That is known as the Lower Temple of the Jaguar. The structure leans against the great ball court and faces the Temple of the Warriors directly across the main plaza. And the interior of it was represent the commemoration of an act where a character seated on a jaguar throne is revered by warriors, while two gods form the top or the government symbol with serpents. And then in front there's a jaguar throne made of stone framed by two pilasters decorated on each side by gods and goddesses. So when you get closer to it, here is the jaguar throne sitting out in front with the carvings, the hieroglyphs on the two pillars on either side. And then you come to the one god that's around the corner. If you went the other direction, you'll see the backside of the ball court running off into the forest. And then looking directly up, you see the main Temple of the Jaguar. This is the back side of it, which you'll see easier than the front side on the other side. Then going around the corner, you see some of these Kukulkan statues. These are feathered snakes. Now, the Mexican Toltec Aztec term for the feathered serpent is Quetzalcoatl. The Mayan term for it is Kukulkan. Kan being the word snake, so it comes out feathered snake. And then here you can see one of the walls of the ball court, and we'll go out into the middle of it, and I'll give you a little panoramic view of that court. You can see just how large it is. Now here's a beautiful view of the Great Ball Court. Now it is the largest ritual ball court in Mesoamerica. Hieroglyphic inscriptions found nearby tentatively relate to a date of 464 AD. It has two large lateral walls where two stone rings are located, and these have images of intertwined feathered serpents, and the sidewalks and the slopes of series of sacrifices of ball game players. The relation of the ball game and sacrifices is widely known. The sacrifice was made by beheading, and it could be assumed that the scenes represented here represented to mythological or historical facts. On the eastern wall of the court there is the Temple of the Jaguars. Its walls represent the processions of the lords and battle scene. So here is the Jaguar Temple that you see up at the top. It's a little closer view of it. And here's a little video.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, so there's 7 of these.
There's 7 of them. When we reach the 7th one, you will find the other team facing them.
Here's a close-up of one of the rings. The object is to knock a rubber sap ball through that opening. Now the people standing on the top of the walls usually were betting against the other side. So those people are trying to score while they're being taunted at this particular point. And they were betting, and all sorts of different things took place here. There's one version that if the one side won, then all the people who bet against them had to give up all their clothing and all their jewelry that they were wearing. But in this picture you can see just how high it is. Our guide said that it would really be impossible to do this because you're not supposed to use your hands in this point. So you kick it up, you use your hip. But we saw a recreation of this game in Mérida, and they had the whole thing set up, and they had mobile goals, a little bit smaller, and they were indeed able to put it through there. It took a while, and it's not supposed to be easy to do because there is the possibility that the winning team survives and the losing team is sacrificed, or the the person who scores the winning goal has the choice to allow themselves to be sacrificed. But in most cases, the game ends up 0-0. There's a whole religious aspect that goes with this. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I'll just mention it. The gods of the underworld, Exbalba, are underneath the ground. And they had opponents called the Hero Twins, who actually figured out a way to cheat death. But they created this game so that everybody jumping down making noise drove the gods of Exbalba crazy. So that's one of the representations. This is like man fighting against his ultimate death. Then here's a little closer view of some of the carving on the side of the wall. And when you get down to the end, you'll see that there is a Kukulkan or a Quetzalcoatl feathered serpent that is at each of the four corners, 2 on the one end and 2 on the other end. And here's a short video showing the whole Kukulkan.
The result of this picture is the long-term relationship between Tula and Chichen that was bringing just more Mayan and the Mexico. And the Mayan invaded Mexico.
This is a look back after being at the very end of the ball court. And when you turn around to the opposite side, there is the Temple of the Bearded Man, which is part of the South Building Complex near the ball court. The Temple of the Bearded Man is a rectangular building with an entrance formed by 2 carved columns. The stairway leading up to the entrance is flanked by balustrades decorated with low-relief carvings of a tree growing from the top of an earth monster's head. There are birds in the tree and above a panel depicting the man-bird serpent, better known as Quetzalcoatl Kukulkan. The interior of this temple is decorated with low-relief carvings with rows of Toltec warriors and other individuals. There are scenes in the vault that depict decapitation, the preparation of human heads, and scenes including activities related to various cults. And then we'll go by the walls of the ball court on the other side, and we'll be heading to the platform of the skulls. So our next stage of our visit to Chichen Itza, we're going to go to this site right here, Tazapantali, and that is the skull rack. There is a temple of the jaguar, which is right down here, and then there's a Venus platform. And once we finish that, then we'll head to the main event, which is the Castillo. Now this low T-shaped platform, which is heavily decorated, has several lines of human skulls that are carved into it in low relief. The east extension of this partially reconstructed platform is decorated with 2 narrow serpent friezes and a band of eagles in the act of offering human hearts. These are interpreted with Toltec warriors depicted with human heads but skeletal bodies, probably representing dead warriors. These warriors associated with the serpents and flames and some trophy heads may also have been associated with the jaguar eagle cult. Now, decapitated heads of sacrificial victims were displayed on the platform on high poles or stakes in the same way as skulls were later displayed in the Aztec city of Tenochtitlan, as witnessed by the Spanish conquistadors of that great pre-Columbian city. Now, the one thing about human sacrifice is that this is a Toltec city for the most part. This is a Mexican period, not a classic period city. So there is a tremendous amount of human sacrifice that comes from the Toltecs and then later on the Aztecs. In the Mayan classic period, sacrifices would have been restricted to in the morning for the sunrise and other religious events. There were some killings associated with captured people in the various wars that were fought, but those are not fought year-round. They're fought usually during the season when there is no farming that is going on. So anyway, here is a nice view of a close-up of that particular platform. The next building that we see is called the Platform of the Eagles and the Jaguars. Sometimes they're referred to in older texts as tigers instead of jaguars. This is immediately east of the Great Ball Court, and it's built with a combination of Mayan and Toltec styles, with a staircase ascending each of its 4 sides, and the sides are decorated with panels depicting eagles and jaguars consuming hearts. So you can see it from a distance. And then here's a view of the steps. Again, they don't let you go up the steps, and that's this Quetzalcoatl Kukulkan here. And then if you look at one of the panels, here's a close-up of one of the panels where you can see the eagle and the jaguar standing next to it. And then the next platform that you move to is called the Platform of Venus, which is dedicated to the planet Venus. Venus. Its interior, archaeologists discovered a collection of large cones carved out of stone. For their purpose, they have no idea. It's located just north of the Castillo, between it and the cenote of sacrifice. Now, Venus is a big deal, particularly in the Toltec Aztec background, because legend has it in Aztec Toltec religion that at one point Quetzalcoatl came down and ran the world, but his brother Tezcatlipoca got jealous and was able to feed him a poisonous drink, which forced him to eventually leave the area, and then Tezcatlipoca takes over. And then on the day of his leaving at sunrise, he's on this raft of snakes, and the sun comes up, which is a representation of another version of Tezcatlipoca, and tries to destroy him. But what happens is it does not destroy his heart, and the black heart then sails across the face of the sun in the morning. It's called Venus in transit. That occurs every so many hundreds of years, and the belief was in the Toltec Aztec tradition was on one of those days that Quetzalcoatl would come back and get revenge on Tezcatlipoca and his followers. So that's why Venus is a very, very important. So here's some close-ups of it. You can see it's very similar to the other one, but you see the Quetzalcoatl Kukulkan heads are on the corners and the steps are much wider. And again, you still have various things with the birds. There's another view of one of the step areas, a little steeper. And here's some close-ups of the creatures that are on the side. There's the eagle. There's the eagle and one of the warriors off to the side, and then here's a closer view of the eagle. Now we're going to go to the Castillo, to the calendar temple, if you will. So that's our big one right there in the middle of the map, and you'll notice the two cenotes, which we'll talk about later. Now, there are multiple temples here. They started at a smaller one and gradually built them up. But the one numbered B in this picture here, this is a structure that was found while the Mexican government archaeologists were exploring the interior, and they discovered this earlier temple with 9 level stepped base and a single staircase on the north side. And it led up to a 2-room vaulted building with one room directly behind the other. The upper facade of this interior building was decorated with a line of walking jaguars, shields adorned with what appear to be rattlesnake rattles and feathers, vertically intertwined serpents and rosettes. There was a chalk mole statue that was polished with shell eyes, teeth, nails, and is located in the outer chamber of the vaulted building, and a red painted jaguar throne was inlaid with jade eyes, and spots were located against the south wall of the rear room. And there was a mosaic in there as well. This was the main temple that was used at Chichen Itza before the arrival of the Toltecs. Now, when the arrival of the Toltecs took place, they built over the original one. And this is simply, the 2 rooms that were in the previous one were filled in with stone. And then this larger temple of Kukulkan was built over it. It's 30 meters high, first described and sketched by Bishop de Londa. It has 9 levels with a rounded corner and staircase of each. It has 4 sides. Because the orientation may have been associated with astronomical observations or with the Mayan calendar, each of the 4 staircases has 91 steps, a total of 364, with the platform on top of the structure added as a step, bringing the total figure to 365, the number of days solar year. So if we're out on the plaza, here we are looking at it from one direction. This is when we first came in. And the sunrise and sunset will go from the right side to the left side. And then here we are on the corner as we're beginning to walk around it. Now, at the equinoxes, there is an optical effect that takes place. If the trees were cut down on the right side of it, you could see, as the sun rose in the morning, you could see a shadow of a serpent going up the steps into the top building. And then in the evening, with the sun set, it goes down the side of the building. Now, some people have said, well, that's put there so they could determine the exact time of the equinox, but you can see that a week to 10 days before and a week to 10 days after. And it's interesting to note that there are other places in the world where they have a spot where the equinox is important, and one of them is in New Grange. And New Grange site, they have a week period before the equinox and a week period after the equinox where you can see the shadows hit the main entrance coming into the temple. And this is a still picture of what it would look like. They actually simulate this at night with a sound and light show. And then here is a video version of an event that occurred years ago at the site. It can be a little wild. So let's continue going around the temple. So here we are working our way from the north side to the west side. And then here we are directly in front of the west temple. Now I have some pictures a little bit later on. They used to let you climb this. They don't let you climb it anymore. I would imagine it would I don't know how many people you'd lose going up and down that, but it could really be a hazard. And then here we are on the south side. And at the south side, you can see the steps are not quite as reconstructed, but it's right here. You can see the little trench in front of it in this picture, but here's the trench you saw at the beginning of our show, showing the additional stonework to support the new temple, and then of course all the stonework that's underneath the plaza. Now we're around on the corner, coming to the east side. So that's a complete circle around it. Now here's some pictures from the past when they let you go up. Here's an example which would have been very similar to the time we were there, people climbing up. And climbing up is one thing, it's going back down. And by the way, the width of those steps are probably about a size 5.5 or size 6. So it's pretty easy to take a fall. This darker picture was taken by one of my friends at the high school who was down here in the 70s on a vacation, and I gave him a roll of slide film so he could take a picture for me. So this was the slide film picture. And then with the chalk mold altar that I was talking about in the previous section, this is what it looks like. This is the original as it survives. And it's up in the top of the temple at this particular point. You just don't get the chance to see it. Now the other thing that you have going on here is the cenote. Now in this picture you have an aerial view showing the Castillo and showing the cenote of sacrifice. It's about 300 yards from there to the end. This is what we did not get to do when Sheri and I were visiting Chichen Itza. And in this picture, this is one from National Geographic in the 1960s. They were attempting initially to kind of pump the water out. That's impossible because it's hooked up to an underground river system. And so they were using it to suck the sides of the walls of the well to get artifacts off of it. Now, if you were going to go down there, this is where you would come to the edge. This was a little temple that was here, and they did perform a sacrifice. Does not happen very often. It's usually at a time of great catastrophe, more than likely a drought, because Chacmol is the one who is the water god. And the belief was that these wells were like zones where you could go from this world into the world of the gods. Caves were kind of like the same thing. So the belief was that what happened is the gods got busy, or the rain god got busy, and he forgot all about the people. So they needed to send him a messenger. And it's usually a beautiful woman, a virgin, who's then tossed into the well. Now in this picture, you get a little better view of the area and the picture of the woman being thrown in. Then they would have been weighted down. They would have had clothing, multiple layers of clothing. They would have been covered in all kinds of jewelry, so they would sink. And the idea was they would then go down, go through the transition, go and meet the gods. They would then give the message, and then 3 days later they were supposed to come back. Well, nobody came back. Well, it's a good explanation for that. It's a beautiful woman. The gods decided that they would just stay with them. Now we know that at some point this practice changed, because in the later periods, if you floated on top until noon from sunrise, they pulled you out, and that only happened on a couple of occasions. Now when we were there, our guide said that they only found 2 skulls and some other objects. This picture, taken from some of the early excavations, not the one I've shown you with the National Geographic, show a lot more of that. There's a lot more that was going on. A lot of this material that was in the well is actually in, I think it's Yale University, because that was a group that was brought in by one of the American ambassadors, I believe, who purchased the site, or at least the rights to the site, so they could do this excavation work, and then took it home with them. It's been a sore spot, to say the least, between the Mexican government. But they have handed some of the gold objects back. So that's the sacred well. But one of the wells is where they did this sacrifice. And the other side of the temple, there's a regular well. Unfortunately, it's probably connected to this. And by the way, you'll see some charts and things on the media where they talk about how they think that there's a cenote underneath it. Well, this whole area is nothing but these underground caverns and underground rivers. So that's not an unusual thing. It doesn't mean at any second it's going to collapse and go inside. So that is the first part of Chichen Itza. The next time we'll be dealing with the Temple of the Warriors and the observatory, and then I'll get you to the Puke section where you can see what the temples looked like before the Toltecs showed up. Sheri and I hope you enjoyed the tour. Please come by our YouTube channel at Bob Packett, and please subscribe and leave some comments. Thank you very much. I've been doing podcasting on history for over 15 years. I've got over 4,000 shows, and I've done CDs, which of course can be sent out as USBs. So if you would really like to get more on history for free, then come by my website, as you see here, historyaccordingtobob.com, and see what's there. So thank you very much again.